Okay. Good morning, Coalition of Concerned Republicans. Welcome to Restoring Our American Republic. I'm Mike Levine, and I'm here with my buddy and colleague Chuck Benoit, who is all wrapped up in the production aspect of our broadcast today. We want to talk today about the organizational structure of grassroots organizations, but in this particular moment, I think it'll be interesting. I just want to point out a couple of things. Number one, I want to talk about Lou Marin, who is the president of the Florida Republican Assembly today, and some things that he has engaged in that are not so great. And then I want to talk about our infamous chairman of the Lake County Republican Party in my open here today. So number one, Lou Marin is known all over the state of Florida because he's been an amazing activist in reality, done a lot of really great things for conservative politics here in Florida. And then all of a sudden, in this election cycle, he starts showing up at meetings with the Republican candidate for CD11, Nissam Razak, who is a doctor and a lawyer. And he is, I'm going to say for sure he's foreign born. I want to say India, but I'm not 100% on that. I believe it's India, but that, and he's a Muslim. A lot going on with Islam in the United States today. And then Lou Marin, who we have all, whether you love Lou Marin or not, most of us have respected him for a long time, without notifying the Florida Republican Assembly at all. Lou Marin took a job as Nissam Razak's campaign manager, which is a paid position. So I bumped into Lou and candidate Razak at a Republican Executive Committee one evening when this first was rolling itself out. And I asked him a couple of questions about his relationship with the candidate, Razak, and the impact of his chairmanship, of his campaign manager job for Razak on the Florida Republican Assembly. And he says, well, you know, just because I'm working for him for compensation does not mean that the Florida Republican Assembly has endorsed him, because the Florida Republican Assembly has a very detailed and rigorous endorsement process, which Mr. Razak did not go through. And of course, Lou is amazing at spinning things. So he tried to sell me on the idea of why all this was okay. To which I just responded, well, Lou, in your mind, it may be okay, but I do have the right to have an opinion. Correct, Lou? Which he agreed that I have the right to have an opinion, and I was grateful for that. But the fact of the matter is when you start working for someone for compensation, you actually establish a relationship with that campaign that is stronger than an endorsement. It's a fiduciary relationship. So, you know, Lou Marin has really worn his faith on his sleeve for a long time, more than a decade. I've known Lou Marin for about 15 years. And every time you talk to Lou Marin, it's about Judeo-Christian values. But today, he is compensated campaign manager for a foreign-born candidate who is not only Muslim, but is involved with Islamic organizations here in Central Florida. So I'm going to basically say that Lou Marin is the equivalent of the Benedict Arnold of the Florida Republican Assembly, point number one. And then number two, so the reason I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, this is because we have to be so careful about the way that our organizations are structured to protect the value proposition of our grassroots organizations. And we're going to talk about that. But before we do, I'd like to just demonstrate when I'm going to flip over to our illustrious chairman of the Lake County Republican Executive Committee right now. And my point is that Taylor Yarkovsky is a tyrant. So now I'm going to ask Chuck to play that quick snippet of a video of how Taylor Yarkovsky runs Republican Executive Committee meetings. Chuck, push the button on that, please.
No, the answer is no. I'm the chairman, I said no. I'm taking my
Notice the reaction of the Republican Executive Committee.
No,
The answer is no.
I'm the chairman, I said no.
I'm the chairman, and I said no. In an organization that in its constitutional governance document says that we will run our meetings according to Robert's Rules of Order. It's in our Constitution that we will run our meetings according to the Constitution supersedes Robert's Rules of Order, but when the Constitution doesn't address the order of the meeting, then Robert's Rules of Order is the default. So, this guy, can you imagine this guy, ladies and gentlemen? You can compare and contrast, Lou Marin. Thanks for coming on. Chuck, come on. Come on. Because this is just amazing, right? Compare and contrast Lou Marin, the Benedict Arnold of the FRA, and tyrant Taylor Yarkovsky, which you just witnessed. And this is just a one-off, ladies and gentlemen. This is not unusual. Anytime somebody wants to contribute to the direction of the Republican Executive Committee, this is the kind of reaction we get. So the chairman, Taylor Yarkovsky, actually avoids coming to meetings. And then Mike Traynor was the vice chairman of the REC here in Lake County, and they kicked him out. They forced him to resign and then jammed Bill Mathias down our throat to be the vice chair. But now Taylor doesn't have to come to the meetings, and the REC is in safe establishment hands with Bill Mathias, okay? So that is the coward that Taylor Yarkovsky is. He will not stand before his own body, which he's supposed to be a leader, and he hands off to Bill Mathias to do his job because he doesn't want to show up. So that's what you have in Taylor Yarkovsky. But the most important thing to take away from that is that Taylor Yarkovsky is actually a legislator, ladies and gentlemen. So when he goes to the Florida legislature and he wants to pave over your backyard, I'm talking growth management here. He wants to pave over your backyard and put a high-density multifamily government subsidized apartment complex in your backyard, and you object to that. He's going to say, no. The answer is no. I'm the state rep, and this is what we're going to do. That is how Taylor Yarkovsky contributes to the Florida legislature, ladies and gentlemen. So this guy has got to go. And I'm saying to you that I hope everybody who has a vote in the HD25 race will vote for Tom Vail, okay? Because we have to get rid of Taylor Yarkovsky. Whether you like Tom Vail or not, I want to vote against Taylor, okay? Now, Chuck, let's get into, but let me just close, Chuck, real quickly by saying these two gentlemen exemplify the reason why our grassroots organizations, number one, are important, and number two, why they must be well run. And the overlying concept here is that the value proposition of the organization must supersede the individual interests of the leaders of the organization, no matter which organization it is. I will include the Republican Party of Florida and every Republican executive committee in the county. And I suggest to you that every single executive committee, Republican, Democrat, whatever, in the state of Florida should have the right to have their own character and their own public policy priorities. Okay, that should be in the law. And maybe we'll get that proposed in the 2027 legislative session beginning in committee weeks. Chuck, I'll stop now and I'll let you.
Well, let me,
what do you think, Chuck?
I've said it over and over and over again, and sometimes, you never know who's going to be listening to these things. But as soon as you stop governing for the people, you have stopped governing as a Republican. It's as simple as that. But the real question, Mike, that we're hoping, I think, to address here is how do we fix it? I don't know
Okay,
if
we're
this
going to
is.
talk about it. Let's get into it, Chuck. I'm going to answer your question, Chuck. The fix has to be that we have strong, capable grassroots organizations in each of our counties. And then if you're going to have a state agent, if you're going to have an affiliation with a state organization, the state organization has to be strong and it has to be true to its values, Chuck. Now, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I guess my concern is that there's so many grassroots organizations out there, and they just keep popping up. We just can't get a cohesive presence at the table. So if everyone wants their own group, well, we at least have to join together at some point to come up with specific targets and for legislation or local ordinances, whatever. We have to come up with something. And I think what we wanted to talk about is what should each of these organizations do. But the other thing is, how can these organizations somehow unite?
Chuck, I'm going to say to you, because I believe it's true, that the organizations are created because there's some activist out there that wants to be the leader of something and doesn't see themselves um, as congruent with the other organizations that already exist. But I will also tell you, Chuck, and we're going to get into this if we, if I'll shut up and we have time. But having a succession plan in your organization would make it easier for people who want to be statewide leaders of grassroots organizations to fall in to the organization. They can say, hey, I'll get to be an officer this year, and next year I'll be the vice chair, and the year after that or 2 years after that, I'll become the chairman, and that'll be the succession plan. And I won't need to start my organization in order for my, amazing, wonderful voice, to be heard across the state of Florida, Chuck. So I think a succession plan is a big part of it. But of course, each one of these organizations set up their own rules and stuff like that. So there you go, Chuck. That's
There
what I
you go.
think about it.
There you go. Okay, so again, back to the idea of how do we fix this? And I think point number one, you suggest, Mike, that we need to make it easy as possible for the people, the electorate, to actually participate in the organization. Why don't you, let's start there.
Okay. Well, first, Chuck, if you don't mind, Chuck, if you would just run through the talking points that we're going to discuss today, because I should have done that in the beginning, but I labored too much on the assassination of these other two guys. So just let's run through the talking points for today, and then we'll work through them
Okay,
individually. Would
we're
that be all right?
hopefully going to get through point number one to make it easy as possible for people to participate in these organizations. Number two, that these organizations must have their own political committee, PC. That we must be issue based as opposed to particular politician based. The importance of membership as well as fundraising, et cetera, et cetera. And again, you just mentioned it and answered my question. We must have a succession plan. So we're going to start up here at point number one, making it as easy as possible for people to participate in these organizations.
Right. So let's just say, I mean, everybody in this audience understands the commitment it takes to drive from wherever you live to wherever an in-person meeting is happening, and then sit through a long meeting. Typically, I mean, 90 minutes is a aspirational meeting period, and then you have to drive all the way back home. So in Lake County is 100 miles from the south part to the north, 100 miles. So the best case scenario, we hold meetings in Tavares, which typically happens, which means that the people in Tavares and County Commission District 3 come to the meetings because it's close to their house, but you don't get people from District 1 or District 5 because there's such a long drive. So that's the deal. And this is why it's very difficult to grow these organizations. But I'm saying to you, Chuck, as we set out ago, Chuck, it's been almost 2 years, right? I mean, we're coming up on 2 years since we broached this concept of doing a live stream, right?
Yeah.
This is what we're trying to achieve, is making conservative Florida politics accessible to anyone who's interested, right? And I think the organizations need to look at that as well. So if I were running a grassroots organization, I would have my meetings on video conference where people can, and a lot of the organizations around the state do, and that's great, but we have to push it, right, in our local communities, that you don't have to drive to a meeting. You can just jump on a Zoom call or a Google Meets or whatever it is. The Microsoft people have, what's Microsoft's platform? Whatever it is. So, just make it easy so we can sit in our living room or our office and participate on a Zoom meeting. And that's a major step in the right direction. And then education in the world today, Chuck, actually is applying what they call a hybrid meeting, where you can actually have an in-person meeting for those people who want to attend in person, but you can also live stream. I mean, the Board of County Commissioners does it. Many of the city councils do it. So for the other morning, I logged on to the Board of County Commissioners meeting, and they're taking questions from logged in constituents around the county or whatever. Anybody who's logged in, you can raise your hand and they'll put you on the screen in the county commission meeting, and you can speak to whatever it is that you're interested in. So hybrid meetings are another great way to go, but we have to be more creative, Chuck, in making these organizations and their activities easier to participate in. Families are working hard, raising kids, doing all that stuff, and we have to make it easy for people to participate. Chuck?
So, Mike, not that I want to play devil's advocate or anything like that, but for a meeting where there are votes, yay and nay on issues, if there are a group of people at the actual meeting and another group of people watching on Zoom, how efficient or effective would voting be for voting members who are simply on a Zoom call? Would there need to be rules changes in order to allow that to happen?
Well, first of all, you have to decide if you're willing, if you want to do that, if you want to take votes on video conference calls, yes or no. And then the next thing is you can easily credentialize every single one of those people. So, for example, you could, since you have a list of your members and you have their cell phone numbers, you could send a passcode to your member, and you could actually do a SMS text message campaign to your entire membership and says, in order to vote, this is the passcode, and you've got to enter the passcode with your vote. And that's just one idea of many.
Yeah, sure.
But credentializing your members to vote electronically is easy.
Sure.
So that's really not an issue.
Let's move on to point number 2, because we just moved through this half hour. For each organization to have their own political committee, in other words, to raise and spend money legally for these elections. So,
Chuck, standing in front of politicians and screaming isn't good enough. Okay, it's just not good enough. So it's amazing, right? I mean, the establishment comes after us with great, really almost inexhaustible amounts of money, right? I mean, government is for sale. And when you can move the politics of the day, people will pay you to do that. And that's what's going on in our legislature, for sure, without a doubt. And in our executive branch to a degree, right? So every organization must have a political committee, which does take work and is technical to a degree. It's not overwhelming. It's like running a business, right? So yeah, there are some accounting requirements. There are some reporting requirements and stuff, but every organization has to be incorporated and has to have their own political committee. Otherwise, what you're doing is you're delegating your voice to the state organization who may not share your values. So I highly recommend that local grassroots organizations have their own political committees so they can be in charge of their own spending. Okay.
And you're talking
Chuck.
about actual, the people out here, instead of sending money to particular politicians, to send their money to the PCs who would allocate those funds to politicians who have their endorsement.
Which brings us to our next bullet point.
Right. Issues based.
Exactly.
Issues based versus politician based or personal based.
Yeah, exactly. So here's the next step, Chuck. When you go to a meeting of a grassroots organization and you have your own political committee, if I was your leader, you would vote on what we do with that money, right? You would have your voice would determine, you know, in context with your group, what happens to that money. But when you are a member of a state organization and everybody in the state funds the statewide political committee, then you're delegating your voice to the executive board of the organization. And then, as Lou Marin clearly acted out in this election cycle, he's no longer really that Judeo-Christian. He actually responded to the executive board who questioned him about his behavior that no, instead of supporting Judeo-Christian values, we need to support all religious values. And he wrote it down and sent it over to the executive board. So, that's what happens. You can entrust, and I could give you other examples of statewide leadership who have absconded with grassroots money or have misled the grassroots as to their impact on the activities of the statewide organization, but it happens more times than not. It is the rule more so than the exception. So I'm saying to you that it's very important that local organizations have their own political committees where we can all sit around the table or get onto a video conference call and we can actually debate what is the best use of our money, Chuck.
There you go. And again, the idea of supporting issues, which the point being that if rather than saying, well, we'll support you as a politician, will you support our issues? Because if you're unwilling to support our issues, we're unwilling to support you. And it's not you that we're dealing with, it's the issues. And we have a compact, if you will, that allows us to remove our support if in fact that politician doesn't
They should
go
sign an
along with it.
affidavit, Chuck.
Yeah,
We should.
sure.
Every grassroots organization should have a list of their legislative priorities, and they should draft up an affidavit on each one of those priorities. And if the candidate is willing to file legislation in support of that initiative or that issue, then they should sign an affidavit that says they'll do that when they go there. And if they don't, you'll have it in writing from them that they have broken a promise to you. So, and look, Chuck, I've said it to many of these organizations, to their executive boards, that there's not a single politician in the state of Florida. Some are better than others, obviously, but none have honored the commitments that they've made to the grassroots in their entirety. Okay, all have broken the confidence of voters for whatever reason, and of course, the reason is that the legislature is leadership heavy, and they are pressured by leadership one way or another, and they don't have based on the structure of the legislature and the consequences associated with challenging leadership, they choose to support what leadership tells them to do instead of supporting what they promised or what they alleged that was their values when they were running. So even their own personal values are not necessarily represented in the way they govern in Tallahassee, Chuck.
Sure. And one of our final points, we've actually kind of talked about our final point, but this last one, the importance of membership. And under that membership thing, we're talking about possibly coming up with a fundraising compensation plan and working on legislative analytics. What say you?
Well, Chuck, I think the most important piece to me is, and it's really amazing if we look through history, most major shifts in political or societal history are actually effectuated by a really small number of people. So that just kind of goes back to the idea that if we had 5 or 10 people in every single county that were monitoring the legislative delegations from their county, then that's a very small group of people who could actually dominate the legislature, because we know, you put all this issues-based thing in place, and then you have people that are part of the legislators' constituency tracking them, as far as what legislation do they file, what committees do they sit on, what are they co-sponsoring, et cetera. And then you just go through it and you say, this is what your legislator's doing. And then you do it on a live stream like this, is what I recommended to various different organizations around the state. And this is another indicator, Chuck, that the grassroots organizations really aren't interested in being any better than the politicians that we elect, because they don't want this. I was told very directly and emphatically that my plan would wreck high profile political organizations around the state. And, yeah. So what I'm hearing from those leaders who told me that is that they really want to be kings. That's what they want. They want to be in control of the organization. They want preferential treatment from elected officials. And therefore, instead of being issues based, we want to continue to fund politicians so that when they get elected into office, they owe me a favor. They owe me, what's the word I'm looking for, Chuck? Loyalty. They owe me, whatever, inclusion, respect.
Inclusion.
Okay.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm saying to you that that's the story. I mean, on many occasions, the grassroots organizations are as bad as the politicians that we complain about. And then, of course, we give these politicians who promise one thing and then perform differently when they get into the legislature. When we have fundraising dinners and stuff, we give them prominent speaking roles at our fundraisers and our community events, which I think that's insane. I mean, basically, it's just well, of course, America does it all the time, right? Again, the Russians told us a long time ago that Americans will sell us the bullets that we shoot them with, right? You remember that, Chuck?
Yeah, right.
Right. Americans will actually sell us the bullets that we shoot them with, right? And it's the same thing when you bring in these legislators who have betrayed you and you give them prominent speaking roles in your meetings and stuff, you're basically giving them the bullets to shoot you with, right? And I think that's foolish. And I got news for you. There's a lot of people in these grassroots organizations that are brilliant and are compelling. And, when you put them in front of a podium and a microphone, they do a really great job outlining it with, very interesting stuff. So the elected officials are, I would say, typically not the most engaging. And of course, they're also restricted by what they can say. So if you want to have an entertaining fundraiser, look inside of your own organization and find that outspoken person who really is articulate and put them in front of the microphone. They'll entertain your guests. They'll throw red meat to the base as well as anybody, Chuck.
Fine, fine. And now we already mentioned our final point, but it's still worth noting it here at the end, in the last minute or so that we have here, that every organization must have a succession plan. There must be a way to know when and who might possibly be next in line.
Not to mention, Chuck, it gives people that are members of the organization, it gives them a path. Why should I be involved in this organization? Well, if I work really hard and I do good things for the organization, then maybe someday they'll put me on the executive board. And when I get on the executive board, maybe I'll go from being a secretary or a treasurer to being a vice chair or something like that. And then the vice chair would automatically ascend into the presidency. So look, this works really well for organizations that do it. And it also gives us the ability to keep the value proposition of the organization intact despite changes in leadership, Chuck.
There you go. Well, Mike, why don't you give us a final word on all this?
Ladies and gentlemen, the grassroots organizations are critical to our ability to maintain and sustain and restore the values that our country was built on. And based on, the base political model that we operate under in this country and this state, um, you know, money tramples all over the will of the people in the best interest of median household income working families. So it's imperative that we have strong grassroots organizations that actually have the ability to remove legislators and executive branch elected officials from office. If we can't do that, then they will continue to trample on us. So we can't continue to do what we've always done. We must improve our strategies and tactics. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike Levine, and thank you all for tuning into our twice weekly live stream. Again, please follow us on Facebook and X at Restore Our Rep 76. Check us out on YouTube at Restoring Our American Republic ROAR. Please like and share the program, and remember, if you're unwilling to govern yourself, you will be governed by tyrants. Until next time, God bless you. God bless President Donald J. Trump, and God bless America.